Admiral Vexthara stood on the bridge of his flagship Stellar Dominion, watching the holographic display show the human mining colony growing larger ahead. His 4 massive battle cruisers moved through space like predators approaching prey. Behind them, 60 destroyers and countless fighter squadrons filled the void with their threatening presence. "Admiral, we're detecting minimal defensive signatures from the colony," reported his tactical officer, tentacles clicking against the control panel. Just as intelligence predicted, this will be over within the hour. Vexithara's scaled face twisted into what passed for a smile among his species. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered 17 star systems in the past year alone. One small human outpost would barely qualify as target practice for his warriors. The mining colony New Busan floated peacefully in the asteroid belt, its simple structures connected by transport tubes. Ore processing facilities and worker habitats dotted the rocky surface of the largest asteroid. To Vexithara, it looked defenseless and pathetic. "Begin the assault," he commanded. That's when everything went wrong. The first wave of Zephyrian fighters screamed toward the colony, energy cannons charging. Suddenly, the asteroid field itself seemed to come alive. Hidden among the rocks, small human ships emerged like ghosts. They weren't sleek military vessels, but converted mining craft and cargo haulers, bristling with improvised weapons. Captain Kim Day sat calmly in the command center of the colony, watching multiple screens showing the approaching enemy. His voice remained steady as he spoke into his communicator. "All units, remember the drill. This is just like the simulation we ran last month." Lieutenant Park Hai worked at the tactical station, her fingers dancing across holographic controls. She had studied every battle the Zephyrians had ever fought, learning their patterns. Enemy fighters approaching Sector 7, initiating Ghost Protocol. The human defenders didn't meet the Zephyrian assault head-on. Instead, they vanished into the asteroid field. When the alien fighters pursued, they found themselves flying through a maze of floating rocks and hidden dangers. Mining charges detonated around them, filling space with debris and confusion. "What kind of military doctrine is this?" Vexithara snarled as his pilots reported losses. "They're fighting like scavengers, not soldiers," Sergeant Li Wu commanded. The ground defense from deep inside the colony's tunnels. His people weren't wearing advanced battle armor like the Zephyrians expected. They wore simple work suits and mining gear, but they knew every inch of their home. When enemy troops landed on the asteroid surface, they found the humans had turned the mining tunnels into a deadly labyrinth. The Zephyrian soldiers, trained for open battlefield combat, struggled in the tight corridors. Every intersection held surprises. Mining equipment had been converted into weapons. Industrial cutters became deadly traps. The humans used the colony's own systems against the invaders. Communications officer Choi Min sat in a small room filled with jury-rigged equipment. She wasn't using military-grade encryption systems. Instead, she coordinated the defense using modified mining frequencies and old Earth languages that the Zephyrian computers couldn't translate. Her calm voice carried across multiple channels, keeping every defender informed. Mining Team 3. There's a path opening through Sector 12. Cargo hauler Soul Express. You have clear approach for supply run. The space battle continued for hours. Every time Vexithara thought he had the humans cornered, they would disappear into the asteroid field and emerge somewhere unexpected. Their weapons weren't the advanced energy cannons his forces used. Instead, they fired solid projectiles, mining charges, and even chunks of processed ore at incredible speeds. "Admiral, these projectile weapons are penetrating our shields," his weapons officer reported in panic. "Our energy barriers aren't designed to stop solid matter moving at these velocities. The human ships fought like pirates rather than soldiers. They used the asteroids for cover, employing slingshot maneuvers around gravitational fields to build speed. Mining ships would suddenly appear, launch their attacks, then vanish back into the rock maze before the Zephyrians could respond." Captain Kim Day watched the battle unfold with quiet satisfaction. His people weren't professional warriors, but they were miners, engineers, and workers who knew how to solve problems with whatever tools they had available. They had turned their entire home into a weapon. After 3 days of constant fighting, Lieutenant Park High approached Kim Day with new intelligence. "Captain, long-range sensors are showing massive Zephyrian reinforcements approaching. We've accomplished our mission parameters." Kim Day nodded and activated the colony-wide communication system. "All defenders, this is Captain Kim. Execute withdrawal protocol. Everyone to designated evacuation points. We're going home." The human forces began their retreat with the same precision they had shown in battle. Ships that had been hiding throughout the asteroid field suddenly revealed themselves, picking up personnel and equipment. Within 6 hours, the colony was empty except for automated systems and a few surprises left behind for the Zephyrians. Admiral Vexithara stood amid the ruins of what should have been an easy victory. His fleet had suffered terrible losses against a handful of converted mining ships and part-time soldiers. The casualty reports made no sense. How could the Empire's finest warriors lose so many ships to scrap metal and mining equipment? "Admiral," his intelligence officer approached nervously, "we've analyzed the human equipment and tactics. These weren't military standard weapons or strategies." Vexthara's eyes widened in horror as the implications hit him. If this wasn't humanity's real military, then what had they actually been fighting? Agent Krillnox materialized in the shadowy corner of a human space station, his advanced camouflage suit rendering him nearly invisible to the naked eye. His mission was simple: infiltrate human networks and discover the secret behind their devastating military capabilities. The Zephyrian Empire needed to understand how such a small force had inflicted massive casualties on their finest fleet. The space station bustled with activity. Human civilians walked past him, completely unaware that one of the galaxy's most skilled infiltrators stood mere feet away. Krillnox observed their casual behavior, noting how relaxed they seemed despite recently facing a major military engagement. These people acted like nothing significant had happened. Moving through the station's corridors, Krillnox found an access terminal in a quiet maintenance area. His biomechanical fingers interfaced directly with the human computer systems, bypassing security protocols that would have stopped lesser agents. Within minutes, he was deep inside the colony's administrative databases. "Finally," he whispered to himself, expecting to find classified military files and strategic battle plans. Instead, the first document he accessed made his blood run cold. The file header read, "New Busan Colony Defense Exercise, Performance Review." Exercise? Krillnox scrolled through the document with growing confusion. The battle that had cost the Empire thousands of lives was listed as a training drill. The human database treated their devastating defensive action like a school project. His tentacled hands trembling, Krillnox dove deeper into the system. He accessed the personnel roster for the defending force, expecting to find elite commandos and career soldiers. What he discovered instead sent waves of shock through his nervous system. Captain Kim Day wasn't listed as a military officer. His primary occupation was part-time defense instructor and civilian engineering consultant. The man who had orchestrated the Empire's defeat taught weekend classes at the local community center. Lieutenant Park High's file was even more disturbing. She worked as a professor at New Seoul University, teaching courses in historical military strategy and ancient Earth conflicts. Her research papers included titles like Guerrilla Tactics of the Vietnam Era and Naval Strategies of the Pacific War. Krillnox felt his confidence cracking as he reviewed more files. Sergeant Li Wu was listed as a farmer who grew hydroponic vegetables in the colony's agricultural section. His military training consisted of monthly weekend drills and an annual 2-week exercise. Communications officer Choi Min worked in the colony's civilian logistics department, coordinating supply shipments and managing trade routes. Her advanced encryption techniques that had baffled Zephyrian intelligence were actually modified versions of commercial shipping codes. The agent's investigation led him to the Human Military Academy databases, hoping to find evidence of advanced warrior training programs. Instead, he discovered something far more terrifying. The tactics that had devastated the Zephyrian fleet were being taught in classes labeled Military History and Pre-Space Combat Studies. Course descriptions made his skin crawl. Primitive warfare techniques covered strategies used by ancient human civilizations before they reach the stars. Historical conflict resolution examined battles fought with chemical explosives and projectile weapons. Asymmetric defense strategies analyzed how smaller forces could defeat larger ones using environmental advantages. Krillnox accessed lecture recordings from these classes, watching human instructors casually explain the tactics that had nearly destroyed Admiral Vexithara's fleet. A young professor stood before a classroom of teenage students, pointing to holographic displays of asteroid fields. When facing a numerically superior force in an asteroid environment, the instructor explained, remember to use the terrain to your advantage. Mining charges can be repurposed as weapons, and cargo haulers make excellent hit-and-run platforms due to their maneuverability. The students took notes like this was basic mathematics rather than advanced military strategy. Another recording showed a different class where students practiced the exact maneuvers that had confused Zephyrian pilots. They called it historical reenactment and treated it like a fun game rather than serious military training. Krillnox discovered that the weapons used against the Empire weren't cutting-edge military hardware. They were improvised devices built from mining equipment and industrial tools. The humans had literally fought the galaxy's most powerful military using construction gear and farming equipment. The most shocking discovery came when he accessed Earth's central military database. The colonies weren't defended by humanity's actual military forces. Real human soldiers were stationed in something called the Deep Space Frontier, dealing with threats that weren't even mentioned in public records. References to these forces appeared in fragments throughout the database: 7th Fleet Deployment, Outer Rim Patrol, Strategic Defense Command, Classified Operations, Special Forces Division, Void Sector Assignment. Krillnox realized with growing horror that the Zephyrian Empire had been fighting what humans considered their hobby club. The people who had inflicted such devastating losses on his civilization were part-time volunteers who practiced ancient warfare techniques for fun. He found video logs of the colony defenders reviewing their performance after the battle. Captain E. Kim Day sat in a simple conference room, talking to his team like they had just finished a sports game. Overall, I think we did well for a training exercise, Kim Day said casually. Lieutenant Park, your tactical predictions were excellent. Sergeant Lee, the tunnel defense worked perfectly. Officer Choi, communications stayed clear throughout the engagement. They discussed their battle against the Empire, like teachers reviewing a student presentation. They critiqued their own performance and made suggestions for improvement, completely unaware that they had just achieved what the galaxy considered impossible. Krillnox accessed more files, finding references to humanity's actual military capabilities, buried in routine administrative documents. Supply requisitions mentioned weapon systems that didn't appear in any database he could access. Personnel transfers referenced military units with designations he'd never heard of. The terrifying truth became clear. The Zephyrian Empire had declared war on humanity's children, while the adults were busy elsewhere, fighting threats that made his civilization look like insects. The Zephyrian intelligence vessel, Shadow Talon, drifted silently through space. Its advanced sensors locked onto human communication frequencies. Admiral Vexithara had ordered complete surveillance of all human transmissions, desperate to understand how his mighty fleet had suffered such devastating losses. The ship's communication arrays worked around the clock, intercepting every signal from human space. Lieutenant Commander Zekimar sat hunched over the monitoring station, his multiple eyes scanning endless streams of data. For days he had listened to routine human chatter, cargo manifests, civilian conversations, shipping schedules. Nothing that explained their military capabilities. Then, late during the third cycle, he detected something different. "Admiral, I'm picking up a secured transmission from Earth Command," Zekimar reported, his voice trembling with excitement. "This could be what we're looking for." The communication came through clearly, apparently not intended to be secret from alien listeners. Human commanders were conducting what seemed to be a routine performance review. Zekimar activated the recording system, knowing this intelligence could change the course of the war. Colonel Shinbo's voice filled the bridge of the Zephyrian vessel. His tone was casual, almost bored. as if discussing a minor administrative matter. Let's review the new Busan engagement, shall we? Captain Kim Dae's unit performed adequately, though response time was approximately 12 minutes slower than our standard protocols require. Admiral Vexithara leaned forward in his command chair, 12 minutes slower than standard. The human response had seemed lightning quick to the Zephyrian forces. What kind of military operated with such precise timing requirements? The recording continued with another voice, Major Yang Su, who sounded equally relaxed. Lieutenant Park, Hyuxi's tactical deployment was textbook classical Earth strategy, very effective against linear formations like the Zephyrians used. The asteroid field maneuvers were straight from the ancient Terran playbook, Chapter 8 if I remember correctly. Zekmar's tentacles curled in confusion. Ancient Terran playbook? Were the humans using strategies from their primitive past? The tactics that had nearly destroyed the Empire's finest fleet were apparently historical techniques that human commanders considered basic knowledge. Sergeant Li Wu did well with the ground defense, Major Yang Su continued. Though next time I recommend implementing the Mongol feint technique rather than the straightforward tunnel warfare approach. It's more effective against concentrated enemy positions and would have reduced casualties by an estimated 15%. The Zephyrian officers exchanged horrified glances. The humans were discussing their devastating defensive action like teachers grading homework. They critiqued their own performance against the Empire's elite forces as if it had been a routine exercise. Colonel Shinbo's voice returned to the recording. Overall assessment of the engagement. Satisfactory, but not exceptional. The militia units need to review their ancient Terran tactics manual, specifically chapters 12 through 15. The section on asymmetric warfare in asteroid environments requires additional study. Admiral Vexithara felt his blood freeze. Militia units? Asymmetric warfare manuals? The force that had inflicted massive casualties on his battle fleet was being treated like a weekend hobby group that needed more practice. The human commanders continued their discussion, completely unaware that enemy agents were listening. Major Yang Su brought up resource allocation. Speaking of training exercises, we should probably increase ammunition supplies for the colonial defense units. They used up their monthly allotment during this engagement. Agreed, replied Colonel Shinbo. Also, I'm recommending that Captain Kim Dae and his team attend the Advanced Historical Combat Seminar on Luna next month. Their performance was good, but they could benefit from learning some medieval siege techniques. Medieval siege techniques. The Zephyrians were struggling to process what they were hearing. The humans who had outmaneuvered their most experienced pilots were being sent to study ancient warfare methods, as if they were students taking remedial classes. The conversation shifted to equipment reviews. The improvised mining equipment worked, well as weapons, noted Major Yang Su, but next time we should provide the militia with some actual military-grade tools. Using construction gear in combat is effective but not optimal. Zekmar nearly fell from his station. Construction gear? The weapons that had torn through Zephyrian armor and shields were modified mining tools. He quickly accessed the combat recordings, reviewing them with this new information. The devastating projectile weapons were indeed industrial equipment, or processors converted to launch chunks of metal at incredible speeds. Admiral Vexthara demanded to hear the recording again, unable to believe what his translator was providing. The humans discussed their battle against the Empire like it was a minor training drill that had gone reasonably well, but needed improvement. Colonel Shinbo's voice continued with routine administrative matters. Moving on to other business, I need to approve deployment schedules for our regular military units in the Outer Rim. The machine intelligence threat in the void sectors requires additional resources. Regular military. Outer Rim deployment. The Zephyrian intelligence officers realized with growing dread that they had never faced humanity's actual military forces. The devastating defeat they had suffered was inflicted by what humans considered amateur volunteers. The recording revealed more terrifying details. References to Special Forces Division operations in distant galaxies. Mentions of strategic, reserve units that remained on standby for serious threats. Discussion of deep space frontier commands, dealing with dangers the Zephyrians had never even heard of. Major Yang Su made a casual comment that sent chills through every Zephyrian on the bridge. Oh, and Colonel Admiral Park Jin's 7th Fleet is returning from the Andromeda Patrol next month. Should we schedule their R&R time on Earth, or do they prefer the orbital stations? Andromeda Patrol? The humans had military fleets operating in other galaxies, while the Empire struggled to control a few star systems. Admiral Vexithara realized that his civilization had been fighting what amounted to humanity's local police force while their real military was elsewhere, treating intergalactic threats as routine assignments. The communication ended with Colonel Shin Bo making final notes. Record shows militia training exercise completed successfully. Recommend similar engagements for other colonial defense units. It's good practice for them, and apparently provides useful intelligence on potential enemy tactics. The Zephyrian bridge fell silent, except for the hum of ship systems. Admiral Vexithara stared at the empty space ahead, finally understanding the magnitude of his mistake. The Empire had declared war on humanity's weekend warriors, while their professional soldiers were busy fighting real wars against threats that made his civilization look primitive. Zekmar turned to his commander, with fear in his multiple eyes. "Admiral, what do we do with this information?" Admiral Vexithara sat motionless for long moments before responding. "We pray that humanity's real military never notices we exist." The Zephyrian detention facility on Kepler Station hummed with energy shields and security systems. Admiral Vexithara paced outside the interrogation chamber, his scaled hands clasped behind his back. After weeks of failed intelligence gathering, his forces had finally captured a human prisoner during a supply run to the abandoned New Busan colony. Inside the stark white room, Corporal Han Ji sat calmly at a metal table, her hands folded in her lap. She was younger than most of the militia members the Zephyrians had encountered, maybe in her early 20s, with the relaxed posture of someone completely unafraid. Her simple civilian clothes and mining badge suggested she was just another part-time volunteer. Chief Interrogator Veclon entered the chamber, his biomechanical implants whirring as they analyzed the human stress levels. To his surprise, Hanji showed no signs of fear or anxiety. She looked up at him with curious eyes, as if meeting an alien interrogator was an everyday experience. "State your name and military rank," Veclon commanded, his voice artificially enhanced to sound intimidating. "Corporal Han Ji, 3rd Colonial Defense Militia," she replied cheerfully. "Though I should mention that's a part-time position. My main job is teaching history to kids at the colony school." Veclon's sensors detected no deception in her voice. A school teacher. The Empire had captured a school teacher who moonlighted as a militia member. He activated his recording devices and began the formal interrogation. "Explain the advanced military tactics your forces used against our fleet," he demanded. Han Ji tilted her head thoughtfully. "Advanced? Oh, you mean the asteroid field maneuvers and the tunnel defense strategies. Those aren't advanced at all. We learned those from my middle school curriculum." The interrogator's cybernetic eye twitched. "Middle school curriculum?" "Sure," Hanji said with a bright smile. "I teach Unit 7, pre-spaceflight warfare, to my 8th grade students every semester. The tactics we used against your ships were straight from the textbook. Pretty basic stuff, really." Veclon felt his confidence wavering. The strategies that had decimated the Empire's finest fleet were being taught to children as history lessons. He pressed on, hoping to find some evidence of advanced military training. "What is your combat experience?" "Combat experience?" Han Ji laughed, a genuine sound that filled the interrogation room. "We don't have combat experience, we're just part-time militia. I teach school during the week and do defense training on weekends. Captain Kim Day runs the local hardware store. Lieutenant Park Hai teaches university classes about ancient warfare." The young woman leaned forward, suddenly looking concerned. "Wait, did you think we were professional soldiers?" "Oh no, that's embarrassing. We're just volunteers who study Old Earth military history for fun." Admiral Vexithara, watching through the observation window, felt his world spinning. The force that had humiliated his empire was composed of hobbyists who treated warfare like a recreational activity. Veclon. "Change tactics. trying to extract information about humanity's real military capabilities. Where are your actual military forces? Hanji's expression brightened. Oh, the real military? They're stationed at the outer rim, dealing with the machine intelligences in the void sectors. Captain Kim Dae always said those conflicts require actual soldiers, not part-time militia like us. She spoke about it so casually as if discussing the weather. The regular military handles the serious threats. We just do local defense training and historical reenactments. Machine intelligences? Veclon's voice cracked slightly. Void sectors? Yeah. There's this whole war going on out there against these AI civilizations that went rogue, Hanji explained matter-of-factly. Really nasty stuff from what I hear. Self-replicating robot swarms, planet-eating machines, that kind of thing. The Seventh Fleet has been fighting them for years. The interrogator felt cold dread creeping through his system. The humans were fighting. Wars against threats that the Zephyrian Empire didn't even know existed, while treating his civilization as a minor local nuisance. What about your weapons technology? Your ships? Hanji shrugged. We just used mining equipment and converted. Cargo haulers. The military has actual warships, but they're all deployed fighting real enemies. We make do with whatever we can find in the colony. She paused, looking thoughtful. Actually, I think there might be some old Earth Defense Force vessels in storage. Somewhere, but nobody bothered to break them out for your attack. Captain Kim said it would be good training for us to handle it with civilian equipment. Veclon's cybernetic implants were overheating from the stress of processing this information. The Empire's most devastating military defeat had been inflicted. Pi converted mining ships because the humans considered it good practice. How many human military personnel are there? He asked desperately. Oh, I have no idea, Hanji replied cheerfully. The actual military doesn't share that information with part-time militia like us. But there must be a lot of them. They have fleets operating in dozens of galaxies, dealing with all sorts of threats. She counted on her fingers. Let's see. There's the Void Sector Campaign, the Andromeda Patrol, the Deep Space Frontier Units, the Strategic Reserve Forces, and that's just what I've heard mentioned in passing. Admiral Vexithara stepped into the interrogation room, unable to contain himself any longer. Are you telling us that our conflict with humanity means nothing to your people? Hanji looked genuinely surprised to see the Admiral. Oh, hello. You must be the commander who attacked our colony. Nice to meet you. She considered his question. Seriously, I wouldn't say it means nothing. It was good training for our militia units. But if you're looking for humanity's attention, you'd need to threaten something that actually matters. What would that be? Vexithara asked, though he dreaded the answer. Well, Earth itself, I suppose, or maybe one of the major core worlds. But even then, they'd probably just send a regular military patrol to handle it. The really big fleets are busy with actual threats. Hanji stood up and stretched, completely at ease despite being a prisoner. Look, I don't mean to be rude, but what you did to our colony was just a training exercise for us. If you want to see real human military capability, you'd need to threaten something that requires more than weekend warriors with mining equipment. The two Zephyrian leaders exchanged horrified glances. They had declared war on humanity's children, while the adults were elsewhere, fighting battles against enemies that made their empire look like insects. One more question, Veclon whispered. What happens if we continue this conflict? Hanji's expression grew serious for the first time. Well, eventually someone might notice and send actual soldiers to deal with you, but honestly, I hope that doesn't happen. From what I've heard about the real military's capabilities, it wouldn't end well for anyone. The young teacher-turned-militia member sat back down and smiled warmly. My advice? Maybe we could work out some kind of peace agreement? I'm sure Captain Kim Dae would be willing to discuss it. He's very reasonable. The emergency session of the Zephyrian High Command convened aboard the massive fortress ship Imperial Dominance, floating in the darkness between star systems. Fleet Admiral Kexthol stood before a holographic display, showing intelligence reports from across human space, his multiple arms gesturing frantically at the data. Look at this, he said, his voice filled with growing panic. Every installation we identified as a major human military base has been reclassified. The hologram shifted, showing dozens of facilities across human territory. What we thought was the Strategic Defense Command on Luna. It's labeled as Lunar Military Academy. Historical combat studies. General Voxmar leaned forward, studying the display. And the massive facility on Mars we assumed was their central command. Mars Colonial Defense Training Center, Kexthol replied grimly. The weapons testing facility on Titan, it's called Historical Preservation Society. Ancient Earth Warfare. Demonstrations. The assembled commanders sat in stunned silence as the implications became clear. Every target they had considered crucial to humanity's military was actually a school, museum, or training ground for part-time volunteers. Admiral Vexithara activated another set of displays. The real human fleets were hiding in plain sight. We dismissed them because their designation seemed unimportant. Star charts filled the air around them, showing ship movements across multiple galaxies. Admiral Park Jin's 7th Fleet, listed as Deep Space Patrol, routine maintenance. The 12th Strategic Command, added Intelligence Director Zilnex, marked as Science Mission, Long-Range Survey. The 3rd Battle Group shows up as Diplomatic Escort, Cultural Exchange. Kexthol's scaled face went pale. We've been monitoring what we thought were cargo ships and research vessels. They're actually humanity's primary military forces, operating so far beyond our borders that we never considered them a threat. The Fortress ship's communication arrays suddenly came alive with urgent signals. Scout vessels throughout the galaxy were reporting massive human fleet movements. Ships that had been quietly patrolling distant sectors were now changing course, converging on known space. "Sir," reported Communications Officer Thekvas, "we're receiving intelligence from our deep space monitoring stations. The energy signatures of these returning human vessels are unprecedented." General Voxmar stood abruptly. "How unprecedented?" "Our sensors can barely register them. The power output from a single human cruiser exceeds our entire battle fleet. Their weapon systems are generating energy readings that shouldn't be possible." Admiral Vexithara made a decision that would either save or damn his civilization. "Prepare the Grand Fleet. We attack Earth directly. If we can destroy their homeworld, none of their scattered forces will matter." 3 weeks later, the largest military force in Zephyrian history approached the Sol system. Nearly 10,000 warships, including every dreadnought and supercarrier the Empire possessed, moved through space in perfect formation. This was meant to be the final battle, the decisive strike that would end humanity's threat forever. As they entered the outer edge of the solar system, Admiral Vexithara expected to face Earth's defensive fleets, massive orbital stations, and weapon platforms. Instead, they encountered a single small diplomatic vessel waiting peacefully near Pluto's orbit. "This is Ambassador Kang Min of the United Earth Diplomatic Corps," came a calm voice over the communication channels. "Welcome to the Sol system. I understand you have some concerns you'd like to discuss." Admiral Vexthara activated his external speakers, addressing the tiny human ship. "Surrender immediately, or face the full might of the Zephyrian Empire." Ambassador Kang Min's response was polite, but unconcerned. "Oh, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. You see, Admiral Park Jin's 7th Fleet is returning from maintenance operations in the Andromeda approach. They should be arriving shortly, and would be happy to discuss your concerns in a more appropriate setting." Before Vexthara could respond, space around the solar system began to shimmer. Massive signatures started jumping into normal space, appearing from hyperspace with precision that defied physics. The first human vessel that materialized dwarfed the largest Zephyrian dreadnought like a whale next to a minnow. "Sir," whispered his tactical officer, "the energy readings from that single ship exceed our entire fleet combined." More ships appeared, each one a masterpiece of engineering that made Zephyrian technology look primitive. Sleek vessels with hull designs that seemed to bend light around them. Massive carriers disgorging fighter craft that moved through space like living creatures. Command ships bristling with weapons systems that registered as pure energy on Zephyrian. "Sensors?" Admiral Park Jin's voice filled the communication channels, friendly but carrying undertones of absolute authority. "This is Admiral Park Jin of the 7th Fleet. We've just finished a routine pest control operation in the Andromeda Galaxy and noticed some commotion in our home system. How can we help you today?" Admiral Vexthara stared at his tactical displays in horror. His 10,000 warships were surrounded by human vessels that registered as mobile battle stations. The power differential was so extreme that his computers couldn't calculate firing solutions. It would be like insects attacking. Guards. The 7th Fleet consists of 1,200 vessels, his intelligence officer reported in a whisper, each one individually capable of destroying our entire force. But that wasn't the worst part. Ambassador Kang Min's voice returned to the channels, still perfectly polite. Admiral Park Jin, these are representatives of the Zephyrian Empire. They had some disagreements with our colonial militia units and wanted to discuss terms. Colonial? Militia? Admiral Park Jin sounded amused. Oh, you mean Captain Kim Dae's training group. I heard they had a nice exercise recently. Good practice for the weekend warriors. The casual dismissal of the Empire's greatest military defeat as a weekend training exercise broke Admiral Vexithara's remaining resolve. His civilization's finest fleet, the force that had conquered 17 star systems, was being treated like a minor inconvenience. Sir, his communications officer reported, long-range sensors are detecting additional human fleets approaching from multiple directions. The 3rd Battle Group from the Magellanic Clouds, the 15th Strategic Command from the Void Sectors, and something called the 1st Response Fleet from coordinates our charts don't even recognize. Admiral Vexithara realized with crystal clarity that the Zephyrian Empire had made a fatal error. They had declared war on humanity's children, while the adults were elsewhere, fighting wars against threats so dangerous that entire galaxies were at stake. The part-time militia that had devastated his forces were literally humanity's weekend. Harby Club, all ships, he commanded, his voice breaking. Stand down immediately. Prepare surrender protocols. Ambassador Kang Min's voice returned, still cheerful and diplomatic. Oh, there's no need for surrenders. How about we arrange a nice peace conference instead? I'm sure we can work out a mutually beneficial agreement. The Zephyrian Empire's war against humanity ended not with a bang, but with the terrifying realization that they had never actually been fighting humanity at all. The real human military had been busy elsewhere, treating galactic threats as routine maintenance, while their children played war games with mining equipment. Admiral Vexithara signed the peace treaty with trembling hands, grateful that humanity's actual military forces were apparently too busy with real wars to notice his civilization's insignificant existence. The end.